This is a lockdown booty call. A lockdown booty call.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Lockdown Booty Calls. My name is Robin Boot, and in today's episode I chat with John Pendal. John is a critically acclaimed stand-up comedian, and his last Edinburgh Festival show gained numerous 5-star reviews. On first impressions, John comes across as a fun and friendly, fairly normal chap. And he is. But in 2003, he won International Mr. Leather, and has since been travelling around the world emceeing at various leather-related events. We discussed some of his adventures as International Mr. Leather. We also chatted about how he's taken his knowledge and set up an online kink consultancy. We also talked about clap press-ups and bee gardens. That's gardens for bees, not backups for your A garden. Anyway, this is Lockdown Booty Calls, episode 4, with John Pendal. John, welcome to Lockdown Booty Calls. It's a pleasure to see your face. It's great to have you on as a guest. First of all, how are you and where are you?
I'm okay. And I'm in Goring, which is in West Sussex by the sea.
Oh, that seems like quite a nice little location for a lockdown. Is it as blissful as it sounds?
Yeah, we were doing alternate. One day we'd go to the sea for 10 minutes, and the next day we'd go up the South Downs for 10 minutes. And that was our half-hour exercise. And then the police managed to close every lay-by road car park near the South Downs. So for a while, it was just walking to the same beach every single day. Got a bit bored, but we've discovered if we have enough get up and go, we can cycle to the South Downs as an alternative.
Ah, crafty. So you're actually really
Once
taking the
a week.
exercise seriously just to stick two fingers up to the police, are you?
Yeah, once a week we can cycle.
So do you find with all the lay-bys and car parks and things closed on the South Downs, you're now seeing the whole dogging community on the beaches instead?
No, they're still going up there. They're just walking. They're not doing it in cars.
So literally, and yeah,
walking with dogs.
Walking. So it's now actually turned into just normal dogging as opposed.
It's quite
dogging.
busy up there. Yeah, we've learned not to go on a weekend. If you go up to South Downs Saturday, Sunday, it's really busy with dog walkers.
Yeah, all keeping 2 meters apart, and
No.
actually, I wonder. I don't know how that would work. Actually, I don't think about that sort of community and how it's been affected, and whether you can still allow yourself to explore your normal hobbies, but with the windows wound up and just flashing headlights at each other from a distance.
I haven't asked.
We've gone down a very, very dark and interesting route already. I wasn't expecting it to turn that way. That's all my own doing.
You did that, yeah.
It's all my own doing. I suppose while we are down this dark, windy country road,
yeah,
can I address the large, interestingly dressed elephant in the room at this stage?
Sure. Yeah.
International
Mr.
Leather 2003.
Yes.
I don't think that needs any more question. Please do explain what all that's about.
Well, up until this year, there was a huge convention in America every May. It got postponed this year for obvious reasons, but about 18,000 people go. And it is a worldwide pageant. There's no other way to put it. It is a pageant. I mean, if you've seen Miss World, Miss Congeniality, any of that, it's one of those, but for men wearing leather. And they've run it every year for 41 years. I'm the only British person who's ever won it. I won it back in 2003. I'm known as the Silver IML because I won in their silver anniversary year. And whoever wins it gets to take a year off work, travel the world and do good work. So basically Princess Diana for a year in leather.
Also known as Princess Diana for a year. I'm pretty sure she had her own secrets. And were there different rounds in the contest? How does it work? Believe it or not, I've never actually attended an international.
Sure. So if you qualify in America, it can be ever so serious because they treat it that much more seriously over there. My qualifying round was in a sex club in South London called The Hoist. And it lasted, for me, precisely 30 seconds. I had to get up on some oil drums and stop a club full of men having sex for about 30. I was the opposite of a prostitute. I was up there to stop the sex. And I heckled the bartenders. I pulled on my nipples. I yelled at them. You have 30 seconds before they kill you. You know, that's as long as they're willing to stop what they're doing. And I got off the oil drum, and it turns out it is quite easy to win that if it's a crowd vote and you've already had sex with everyone in the room. So I won that. But then they say, by the way, you've qualified if you want for this thing in May called International Mr. Leather, which is like winning the 100 meters at your local swimming baths and then finding out you're now entering the Olympics. Not only that, you're the only person from your country going, and the club sponsoring you expects you to be in the top 10.
And presumably, America being a much, much larger country, there'd be many more men in the room. And so that would be knackering trying to sleep with all of them to get the votes.
Exactly. So, yes, there's usually, there's kind of 60 contestants, 10 of whom might be from outside North America, another 5 from Canada. But the vast majority are American, who may have gone through 2 or 3 contests to qualify for International Mr. Leather. They may have had to get through a local bar one and then to a state level before they go on to international, whereas I just had my 30 seconds straight there. And one of the things they expect you to do is raise tens of thousands of dollars for charity. So that was my first question in the interview when I got to Chicago. How much money have you raised for charity? And I said, well, I haven't raised any. And they asked, what are your duties as Mr. Hoist? And I said, handing out free tequila at Christmas and free champagne at New Year's. This is really all they needed you to do. And they got very confused and went, but what does somebody do then if they need a new hip and they don't have insurance? And I said, well, they go to hospital and they get fixed. Just blew their minds, because over there, without really a welfare state or social medicine, if you're a leather title holder, you're expected to run a fundraiser every weekend of your year in your local bar, all for people who don't have insurance.
So basically, International Mr. Leather is the American equivalent of the NHS system, is what you're saying. It's like national insurance, but slightly kinkier.
It's not how I saw it, but I think if you're American, maybe. Some of the Americans were very cross. They thought almost it was a competition of how much money you could raise. And they had raised an awful lot and then didn't get very far. Whereas I saw it as, out of the 100% of the score, 5% is what you look like in leather, 5% is what you look like out of leather, and the rest is what comes out of your mouth. Because whoever wins is sent around the world by themselves for a year, representing the community, talking to journalists and doing good works. If you don't have it up here, if you're talking rubbish, that's pretty dangerous that they're sending you alone on this global tour. So really it's about, do you have knowledge, not how much money have you raised? But I think some people got bad advice.
And so when you went through the Mr. Hoist competition, then found yourself in the finals against an international selection of the world's best leather wearers, what happened then? What did that look like, the competition itself?
So the year that I went in for it, the competition was 5 days. It was Wednesday through to Sunday. They've shortened it now, but I got some good advice. They said, you're being judged every single second. Everything gets back to the judges, not just the judged portions. So I made sure I flew out in leather, and I landed at O'Hare in Chicago in full leather, and I queued for a taxi in full leather. That got back to the judges. I only took leather with me, Hoist t-shirts, pants and socks. So there was no chance of anybody reporting back that I'd been seen out of leather.
What was it like on the plane? Did you imagine you have the 3 air vents coming down? You just hog everyone else's hair, because I travel in shorts and a t-shirt normally, and I already overheat. And how was that doing a 9-hour flight? Is it to Chicago or something like that? This
was before 9/11. So if you got on a plane in full leather and knee-high boots, one of the gay stewards would move you up a section. It was worth doing. They would come and find you squished in economy looking like the Terminator, and they'd say, wait until we've taken off, leave it with me. And then they'd find an empty seat for you, and then 9/11 happened and you weren't allowed to move sections. But before then, you would quite often get like the gay stewards moving you up. And at one point, not often, I was moved up to first class, and it caused a bit of ruffle because I'd been moved up after we'd taken off, and they all got a bit upset. And then halfway through the flight, somebody came and knelt by my seat and asked if I had any photos to sign. Well, I was International Mr. Leather. Part of the job is you have a stack of photos and a gold pen, and I got them from the thing, and I signed it in gold. Who's it to? Can I do it to a local group? And then they visibly relaxed in first class. Well, he must be somebody. He's signing photographs. And all of a sudden it was okay that I was up there.
And one of the big effects of 9/11 and the monstrosity is people like you have lost your privileges.
Let's make it all about me.
Yeah,
Actually, one of the
bloody
few
Osama
things,
bin Laden destroying the gay community's perks.
I'd never had a bowl of, I got to be careful here because I know who I'm talking to, but the first time I flew first class, before we took off, they brought me a little ramekin full of nuts, which were warm, and they were assorted nuts. Yeah, I know what you're thinking.
Yeah,
I've had assorted nuts
I
in
won't
my
say
mouth
anything.
before.
The best euphemisms are left unsaid, aren't they?
So I ate all of them except for the green ones because I thought they were off. And when they picked them up afterwards, they said, "Oh, don't you like pistachios?" And I said, "Well, they're green, they're off." And they looked at me so sadly, just going, "Pistachios are meant to be green. You know, they come that way." So now if I see them in a supermarket, I always get a bag of pistachios because it makes me feel like I'm traveling first class.
Ah, nice. Little side story about pistachio nuts. When I was younger, must have been a toddler. I remember going on camping holidays with my parents, and I'd be in a high chair in a little French restaurant, given a big bowl of mussels, big bowl of moule marinière, and I used to love working my way through them. But I was told explicitly, do not eat the mussels if they're already closed, because it means that they were dead before they were caught, and they could give you food poisoning. So I remembered that. But then when I discovered pistachio nuts, I used to always leave the closed pistachio nuts, thinking that they were dead before they were harvested. And they could give you food poisoning. So there we go. Anyway, back to the story. You landed in Chicago after a mouthful of nuts, dressed in leather.
Yes. So I only got the first class after I'd won. That wasn't before I flew. But I landed, and it's 5 days. So you have opening ceremonies where you walk out with the flag of your country, and they expect you to sing the national anthem of your country. Everybody else was fighting over who would hold the flag of their country and fighting over who'd get to sing. I didn't know the words. I haven't sung our national anthem since infant school, where we sung the version "Stuff Her with Plasticine." And they were the only lyrics that I knew. So I'm afraid I did walk out because they hadn't told me in advance, this is part of what you have to prepare. So I walked out with the Union Jack, and they played the national anthem, and I just stood there because I didn't know the words. I was the only country. They should have actually sent us, this is what you need to rehearse.
But did they see that as, oh, he's obviously so patriotic, he doesn't need to say the words, he's just in the moment?
I'm choked. So there's various rounds. Some of them are public. One of them is, they call it pecs and personality. Can you get the attention of the room even if you're just in a jockstrap? And I absolutely, that was my lowest point. I bounced around the stage, hyperactive, because I just didn't want people looking at this. So I pulled at my nipples and I grabbed my groin and I leered at them all. When you watch the video back afterwards, I looked normal. And the bodybuilders who came out and just kind of posed, they looked stiff as anything. So the ones that thought their physique would do the work didn't get any points. And those of us who had very low self-esteem and were bouncing around like a, whirligig, we actually looked like we were filling the stage with energy. So that was pecs and personality. There was a speech round, and I knew if I could get to that, I was in with a shot, because I have written speeches before. And I knew for a fact, if you come out on behalf of anything, if you nail your colours to the mast, you aren't going to win, because there's 9 judges. And if one of them disagrees with you, even docks 1 point, you drop 5 places. It's really tight at the top. So the only way to win at that speech is to say something nobody can possibly disagree with. So the theme of my speech was, whatever you're wearing, whatever your values, live up to the clothes you're wearing.
Very fitting, presumably, for a room full of men wearing leather.
It got a standing ovation because I had milked them. I told some jokes. I've done something sad. I took them on an emotional journey. I built to a soundbite, and then very stirringly, right at the end of the speech, whatever your values, live up to the clothes you're wearing. Really got the crowd going. And I was pissing myself laughing, because you can be a serial killer and you can live up to the clothes you're wearing. It means nothing.
He'd be proud. He may be a serial killer, but proud to be
Yeah.
wearing the blood-stained lumberjack shirt and mask made out of other people's skin. As long as you're proud to do that, then that's the take-home
live
message.
up to the clothes you're wearing. Yeah. So that was the speech, and then they announced the winner, and I knew it wasn't going to be me because I'm this little Baptist boy from Watford. I don't ride a Harley, I don't smoke a cigar, I don't have a hairy chest. It's not going to be me. So I was ready to clap, and they announced the winner. I didn't know who it was. I'm looking around to see who's won. And then on the monitor, it came up 31. And I can remember thinking that is a big coincidence because I have 31 written on my leg. But I still didn't go anywhere because I was so sure it wasn't me. So I stayed ready to applaud. And then the guy behind tapped me on the shoulder. So I stepped aside to let him through. And he went, "No, it's you." And I was so late getting to the podium, I was nearly killed by the indoor fireworks. It was crazy. That's how the little British guy won International Mr. Leather.
The plucky underdog comes through victorious. Oh, and so after that, you said you went around the world as an ambassador for Mr.
So
Leather.
you get 1,000 emails in the first 48 hours. And after that, you get probably 500 emails a week. And you're being invited to 5 different cities almost every day. And you get to pick which ones you go to. So I needed a filter. So one of the things was I said, I'm never going to strip naked. If you want me at a sauna, I'm not going to do it because I'm International Mr. Leather, not International Mr. Naked. I'm not just going to sit on top of a bus and wave. I need to have some microphone time. I prefer it if I could go somewhere no IML had been before so I can be making a difference rather than just hitting the big events that IMLs go to every year and then I'm no different to anybody else. So I had some filters and I picked my journey. And you get given stuff everywhere you go. It's like the Queen, people walking out to the car with armfuls of gear, some of which I had to leave behind because it was more expensive to ship it back home than it was to have it. But then everywhere you go hits you up for stuff. Everywhere has got a silent auction. Every person is emailing, asking if you can't come to our event, can you send something? So I had a room full of gifts during the year, and basically everything lasted 3 months and then got gifted on. There's very little of it that I got to keep beyond a year.
Just like a warehouse with stock going in and out, was it?
Yeah.
And
I'm still being asked for stuff even now. So I have to always, if I get a present and I'm not 100%, rather than give it to charity, it goes in the cupboard. And the next time somebody says, "Have you got anything for our silent auction?" I send it with a little story about how this belongs to IML. So even if it's not worth anything, it'll be worth something to them because it had belonged to an IML.
Yeah, and from that year you had traveling the world as International Mr. Leather, are there any highlights which initially spring to mind? I imagine you have all sorts of stories, some which would be suitable for this podcast, some which probably aren't, but any highlights which...
It's very much like being Charlie in the chocolate factory. You've got the golden ticket because you're introduced to every section of the society globally, the leather community that you're meant to be representing. And they think it's really funny if they always do the demo on you. So as long as you enjoy that fact, you can try everything, whether it be somebody flogged me with Kevlar floggers that have been dipped in kerosene and set alight. And I was at an event where I was getting bitten by mosquitoes because I'm British, I'm foreign food. The mosquitoes loved me. And all I had to do was put a wet towel over my head and stand in the dark. And there was a black and white photographer taking pictures on black and white film, just lit by the flames. And then they would flog the flames up your back. And I was so happy because I just thought that is crisping every mosquito that is currently sucking my blood. I was so happy. Talking of flames, somewhere else, they wanted to put rubbing alcohol up my back. So they made me get on all fours in front of hundreds of people. And rubbing alcohol, when you light it, it burns with a blue flame.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got this guy again with a flogger. And as soon as it got too hot for me, he would smack the flogger and the flames would go out. And they did this a few times. And they thought it would be exciting for the crowd and a bit daring. All I could think of was, you need to put me on a trolley and wheel me around the room singing, "We wish you a Merry Christmas." But I couldn't explain it to anyone because it's a very British tradition. But I did have a Christmas pudding fantasy scene all to myself that they were just filling me with brandy. Eat me and win a sixpence
Oh,
is what I
wow.
used to say at the hoist.
Well, I will be honest with you. Christmas will probably not be the same for me
No.
when my mum brings out a Christmas pudding this year. Well, hopefully Christmas will go ahead still, but that will not
Yeah.
will not have quite the same image in my head.
So I got to try a lot of things.
For those of you who are listening to the podcast version, not watching the webcast, there was a very not particularly subtle wink from John there. So I suggest if you want to hear about those things that he did try, maybe contact him directly and he'll be more than happy to dive
Actually,
in
pretty much
detail.
Everything that's happened to me, I've said on stage. So I have a YouTube channel, just / my name, John Pendal. If you go to that, there's quite a few clips, some more safe for work than others. No, none of them are safe for work.
Depending, if you're working from home, then crack on with it. Okay, which actually leads me nicely to, well, we're over halfway through this podcast and I'm only on to my second official question. It's 2020, we're under lockdown rules. What would you normally be doing at this point in time?
So part of me would be traveling the United Kingdom, doing previews for a show for Edinburgh that is now not happening, the Edinburgh Festival, and the show is 100% out of date because it was about how I struggled moving to Goring. Well, that pales into insignificance compared to what we're all struggling with. And
you were in North London, weren't you? And you moved down, what, 3 or 4 months ago?
End of October, Halloween.
End of October, okay.
It took us 2 years to move because our sale fell through 4 times.
I was going to say, you should have hired a van. It would have been quick. Carry on, John.
But we're so glad we moved because we've got friends in London and their situation is worse than ours. But at weekends, I used to travel to kink events around the world. And during the day, I would teach workshops on kinky sex. And then in between the workshops finishing and the evening parties at the hotel, they would often book me to do kinky stand-up comedy around about 7 o'clock because I would act as glue to keep people in the hotel. If there was nothing between 5 p.m. and the evening dungeon opening, people might go into town and have dinner. And if they were having a good time, maybe not come back or come back later and things wouldn't really get going. And that could kill the atmosphere, kill the reputation of the event. Whereas if they finish the workshops, have dinner at the hotel, see a kinky comedy show for an hour, they've then got an hour to get dressed. They hit the play party as soon as it opens at 9. That event has a very good reputation for, have you seen how jumping it is? You know, we've got all the delegates here and they're here. It did mean that almost as soon as I started doing the comedy, the organisers were signing for me to finish because I was only there to keep people in the hotel. And as long as they were, and I started, can you wrap up now? Because we all need to go to the... No, you've booked me for an hour. You're going to get an hour.
Yeah. Last year, 2019, your Edinburgh show was huge, really, wasn't it? I remember seeing a poster of John Pendal. I think it still said John Pendal Monster on it, but I could not see any of your face or your body because there's nothing but 5-star reviews plastered all over it. And I thought, fantastic. You've obviously put a lot of work into it and it's very, very well deserved. And presumably you're going to try and build on that sort of success and really hit 2020 running. And knowing what your work ethic is like when it comes to comedy and writing, you would have blown everyone away again this August. How are you finding that sort of weird sensation with no focus in August, where you say that your show's already sort of out of date? What are you doing to not necessarily pass the time, but keep yourself focused on creating?
So after each workshop I taught in the past tense, there'd often be a queue of people for 15, 20 minutes with questions that I deal with one-to-one, and I'd often give them a business card. And as soon as lockdown happened across more than one country, some people came forward and contacted me privately saying, would you be willing to do that kind of a chat, but over the internet, one-to-one or for a couple? And I am quite slow on the uptake. It does take a while for me to realize the universe is saying you should be doing this, but it became a new business opportunity to do kink coaching, which is like life coaching, but to do with kinky sex. So it could be that you have been kinky in the past, but now under lockdown, you're struggling either being apart from somebody or living with someone 24/7, because the thing that kills kink is domesticity. You can have all the sexy fantasies you like, but when you're arguing over whose turn it is to clean the bath, that is a real killer. Or it could be that you've had a life up until now you were happy with, but this period has made you reevaluate. And when it's lifted, you would like to try new things. And you either need to research a new area of interest or get over a mental block or deal with a hang up or an issue. And we'll just talk through that in sessions so that when the lockdown is lifted, you'll be more prepared to enjoy life.
And is this clients from all over the world?
Yeah. They need to be English speaking because I only speak beetje Nederlands, so I can't really do it in any other language. And they don't necessarily need to be gay men because kink, is just activities that anybody can do. If it gets into the area of actual sex rather than kink, then I might suggest they find somebody of their gender or sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. But if all we're doing is just talking about mental blocks, body issues, or concepts to do with kinky activities, I'll chat to anybody. And it's keeping me occupied because for each hour I chat to somebody on the internet, I do about 4 hours of research. And all of that gets typed up before the phone call and then emailed over the second the call is done. So they don't need to sit there making notes. I always say, look, I'm reading off my notes. I'll just send these over.
You've already mentioned YouTube, but presumably if anybody is interested in more details about the kink coaching, then any sort of social media.
If you put my name into Google, or I have a website, Leather London Guide, and /coach, that's the page for that. But yeah, Google my name and you'll very quickly get to me.
Which I see as a good thing.
And I've actually started the workshops. I've started doing those online. So I did last week to a group in Norway, and I'm now arranging to do it for a group in Edinburgh. The only difficulty is quite often I wanted to do demos, and I struggle where it's just me and a screen and then them. So sometimes I have to do it to me, and sometimes I call my partner in to do something to me. But the rest of the time I just have to hold up a picture and go, in days gone by, it looked like this.
Could you get a shop mannequin? And presumably there must be some empty shops that you can go and ransack and just take a mannequin.
But the whole thing of kink is the surrender and responsibility.
Okay.
Somebody is giving up control and somebody is taking that control in their hands, and you're playing them like a musical instrument. So if the other person is non-responsive, that's not what the game is about.
No. Fascinating. Well, hopefully you will get some business your way. Again, at the moment, I think at this point in proceedings, only my parents are listening to this podcast, but hopefully there will be listeners outside my immediate family who will be interested. Hopefully they don't get in touch, only to say thank you for such a thrilling podcast. Because anyway, let's change the subject before that image pollutes my brain anymore. Obviously, that's fantastic that has taken off and given you something to focus on and throw yourself into fully. How are you finding the balance of downtime? I know personally, my mental health has been up and down. I can be really positive and focus on things, but I am struggling to find distractions occasionally. What are you doing just to keep some sort of sanity and routine?
There's some things I do every day. I make sure the lawns have no dandelions every day. I empty all our bins every day. We read something about if you get a home delivery, make sure that outside cardboard packet doesn't stay in the house. Try and remove things from packing as soon as you can and get it out. So we have a lot of rubbish in the garage that I do. I'm in charge of the bins and the laundry and the weeding, and I try and cook my partner a nice meal every night because his work has gone crazy. He's working from home. He gets up early and he's on calls all day long. So the least I can do is try and cook a nice dinner. And then I call them little victories. So there was a book on the bookshelf for a year that I wanted to read and couldn't get round to. I have done 10 pages a day and I've managed to finish it. That's my little victory.
What is the book, may I ask?
It's a graphic guide to don't laugh, a graphic guide to feminism. And I thought I needed to read it. I thought it would be like a graphic novel. It turns out, no, there's a picture on every page, but the picture isn't like a cartoon. It's just a picture. You still have to read. I think it was missold to me. You actually have words that you have to read. It's not a cartoon.
For those listening to the podcast, it's graphic in the sense that there are pictures and illustrations in it, as opposed to the content being graphic.
Yeah, exactly. I read about first wave feminism, second wave feminism, that I understood. And then it got to the 1970s and it fractured into about 20 kinds of feminism. And I found that a challenge to keep up with. And then towards the end of the book, we got onto Madonna and Pink and the Spice Girls. Easy to the home stretch. That's my generation. So yeah, I'm going to read it again now that I know how it ends.
It's slightly ironic that you do seem to have adopted the role of a 1950s housewife during the lockdown at certain points, getting the dinner on the table and doing all the laundry and the gardening.
Yeah.
And yet you've also used the time to invest in learning about feminism because, well, it's good to find the balance. Do you think you will actually break free from the shackles at some point and say, no, you can make your own dinner. I don't care if you're working too. I'm a strong, independent woman. I can do this.
Because we're both blokes here, we've decided not to divide up chores by gender, but we've decided to divide them by OCD. Okay. So he very definitely has the job of cleaning the kitchen, and I'm not allowed to. And if I attempted to ever clean the kitchen, in his eyes, I would just be spreading the muck around. Whereas I like to hang up laundry because if you pull T-shirts flat with no creases, they don't need any other ironing. When he puts things on the hangers, they just, like socks and pants, just get thrown up without any little tug or stretch. And then I'm trying to put them in the drawer, and they basically need rewashing because they're so creased. So we have our, for the sake of the marriage, you do that, I do this, never the twain shall meet.
And it's finding that understanding in a more modern way, I suppose. Yeah. It's not necessarily the Theresa May putting the bins out is the husband's role. When you've got two husbands in the house, you need to actually find a system that works for both of you.
My dad, when he was alive, was obsessed with finding out which one of us was the woman. And I did tell him really early on, the point of this, Dad, is that we're both men. But he never stopped. Right up to his dying day, he would ask us about any visible chore that he saw had been done. Which one of us did it? Because that would give him a clue as to who was the man. So we would freak him out. Every time he asked, we used to go, we both did, Dad. And he just couldn't work out that two people could have cooked a meal. He just, in his head, because in his entire life, Mum cooked every meal for him.
It blew his mind a little bit. Yeah. Where were graphic novels, when
exactly
he was growing up? You obviously got the balance in terms of the dynamics between you and your husband. How are you managing as well? I know you've set yourself a few challenges as well in this lockdown process.
I couldn't do a clap press up. The one where you press up and you clap. So I started off practically vertical on the stairs, on the 7th stair. And that's really easy because you push up and you're stood upright. And then over a week, I got it down to the 2nd step. And then I moved down to the ground. And now I can do 6 in a row. But I think that is my limit. I'm 48 years old. You have to recognize 6 clap press ups is probably all I'm ever going to achieve.
Well, you don't seem to have a broken nose, which suggests you're maybe not pushing yourself quite as hard as you.
No, but I did. I pulled a muscle in my shoulder. That's when I thought, okay, 6 is the limit because you need the explosive. What is it? You know this.
The plyometric element.
You've got to have the explosive push off to be able to clap, and that just did my shoulder in.
Okay, but 6, that's pretty good going for I haven't attempted to do anything like that recently, I think.
No, I've seen the video of you doing a handstand naked.
Oh, then that's very different. That's just day-to-day routine, but it's not actually bettering myself from a fitness perspective. I don't know what is. I don't think it's better.
I would love to be able to do one handstand naked or clothed.
And talk to me about the bee garden as well. I've seen that pop up.
So I have always loved bees. I just love the fact that when they fly like a helicopter, not like a plane. They don't have lift. So they do it all like a helicopter would. And when we moved down here, I started seeing bees that we didn't see up in London. So we've got high downhill near here. I saw bees that were completely black, except for one that had an orange bottom, and one that was completely black, except had a white bottom and a single yellow stripe. So I then got a bee poster for the wall with all the types of bee. And now we've planted a bee garden where you dig up a section of border or turf or lawn, and you put down, it's like 2 layers of tracing paper, and the bottom layer is a weed barrier, and the top layer has got all the seeds in it, and you cover it with compost and water it for a couple of years, and all these flowers come up that attract different kinds of bees to your garden. But what appears to have happened is every squirrel in Goring has taken it upon themselves to bury nuts at night through the barrier. So each morning we just discover bits of paper all over the lawn. So I don't know where the bee flowers are finally going to come up.
I am trying so hard to restrain myself from making any little comments about burying nuts at night after
Yeah.
the topics we've already discussed. But it does sound like you may not have created the bee garden you'd hoped, but you've
Yeah.
created a Christmas situation for the squirrels, all the local
Yeah.
squirrels, and all you need now is one of them to be dressed in leather and be wheeled on and pretend to be a Christmas pudding and make
Yeah.
it a proper Pendal Christmas. Oh, I like that. Well, I'll have to get you back on in 2 years' time when the lockdown is no doubt still going ahead.
Yeah.
Get a bee update. John, the lockdown isn't always straightforward. I think that's an understatement. And when you're feeling down and you're feeling low and you've got some self-doubt, which is affecting all of us, what do you do to get yourself back on track in terms of inspiration and motivation?
So there's a couple of things that I've been doing. One is my old Pilates teacher from London got in touch to say she's now teaching over Zoom. And it's a brilliant system where if you still have a job and have an income, you can pay for the classes. But if you are unemployed or furloughed, she will send you the link for free. And I've been doing those twice a week. And I didn't realize until I did that first Pilates on a mat on the floor, just how stiff I'd become. I was almost tearful as I realized I'd missed getting my thoughts into my body. So instead of just whirring around with stupid, emptying the bins, washing hands, to actually think about placement of knees and engaging your core, it's a whole other thing to think about for an hour. So I do that a couple of times a week and I find it very helpful. But also early on in my relationship with Andy, I suggested we find a couples therapist, and he got really cross about this because he said, do you think we've got a problem? It's because I know some therapists who say all they ever do is split couples up, because by the time you go to see a couples counsellor, it's already too late. So wouldn't it be great if we saw somebody before we thought we needed to? So we've been seeing her for 5-6 years, and she's the reason that my show got so many 5-star reviews last year, because it was stuff that I discovered in therapy with her help. And we used to see her every 2 months. And now, because of our home situation, we're dialing on Zoom every 4 weeks.
Okay.
And even with nothing happening and no news, and there's been no drama, we actually find we're needing to see her more and more and more just to let off the baseline of anxiety that is creeping up. So both of those are helping.
I imagine that's very useful. I know with my other half, 95% of the time we get on really well, but she is working very long days on the front line for the NHS at the moment, and so she has all sorts of stress. And a lot of the time I sit around the house scratching my arse and not really feeling overly productive, which is a tricky situation to have that complete contrast. Yeah. It's weird because we're both very, very supportive of each other and we get on very well, but there are little things that will trigger us. And I think being able to talk about it with somebody neutral will help resolve that. We've actually been using a technique where we've got an imaginary third person living with us called Ethel.
Okay.
And we get angry with Ethel now, like, oh, Ethel, when will Ethel do the washing up? Or when will, I wish Ethel wouldn't leave her clothes on the floor and stuff like that. Ethel is me, basically, but it feels much nicer having someone else blamed for it.
There's an author called Brené Brown, and she has a great technique, but the technique is you need to remember this in the heat of the moment, is when you whenever we have a row, we always forget to do it. And we remember afterwards, we should have done this. So the trick, if there is one, is to remember this in the middle of a row, is to stop. And you each start a sentence with, the story I'm telling myself is, and then you finish it with whatever you think you're arguing about. So the story I'm telling myself is, you think I'm fat and I shouldn't be wearing this, and I've let myself go, ... And the other person then says, the story I'm telling myself is, ... And then that diffuses the argument, because what you're actually doing is both being triggered by things that are unrelated to what the two of you are doing. It's other stuff that's happened to you, other fears, other memories. And if you can each explain to the other the story I'm telling myself, you can understand each other and hopefully diffuse the argument. But whenever we're having an argument, we never remember to do it.
We will say, next time, remind me, next time we have an argument, we must remember this technique.
Is to stop and say, the story I'm telling myself, because usually it's based on a fear or an anxiety or a memory that the other person may not even be aware of that's what you're worried about. I'm worried that you're spending, the story I'm telling myself is you're spending all our money. And the other person, oh, I didn't even know that was your worry.
That's a very useful advice, actually. I'm sure there'll be lots of people listening to this who go, oh, that's a good idea. I'll remember that next time I have an argument, which is probably due in about half an hour. And you won't. Well,
that is the trick, is being able to snap out of that in a row. You're just having the row. And then we phone our therapist.
And leave it to the professionals. But it's the thought that counts, though, isn't it? It is the thought that counts. And we're getting very close to the end of this podcast already, which the time has flown by, which shows how much I've enjoyed speaking to you. I feel that we should probably do 2 or 3 episodes.
Anytime. My diary is wide open.
Maybe do an uncensored version for those people who want to pay for the podcast, but that could be something we discuss behind closed Zoom calls.
Behind a paywall. Yeah.
Looking to the future, have you set yourself any goals or challenges long term that have resulted from your experience during the lockdown?
Yeah, I'm getting more keen on the life coaching as opposed to the kink coaching. So I am going to find an organization that will train me as a life coach. Because I think in terms of transferable skills, that's something that will help the kink coaching. The kink coaching can help the life coaching. It's something that can be done over the internet, or when the lockdown's over, I'm happy to meet people. But that's something I would be interested in pursuing. But I always like, having done my research, I like the certainty of knowing I've done the course.
Okay. And I've got no idea what sort of course that would be. Can you do that sort of thing online to get certified?
Yes, there are different organizations. Some of them are online, some of them are in person. So I've had one recommended to me that is online. And it's about helping people over blocks to them living life to the full. So it's going to be different for each person, but you're tackling either motivational issues or mental blocks, or mistaken beliefs they have about themselves, anything to help unlock their potential. And I like the idea of that.
Yeah, and you were saying that from your perspective, pursuing the life coaching route would help your kink coaching and the other way around. But presumably from a client's perspective, there'll be an overlap, because ultimately you're coaching people, and people have different desires, everyone must have a fetish of some sort, even if you don't necessarily realize it. And whether that is something on a day-to-day basis, or whether it is something in the bedroom, it's still something which is very much affected by psychology and mental blockages, as you said. So they are very much interlinked, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I did the same with comedy, in that I would do titillating jokes Monday to Friday in vanilla comedy clubs for people that didn't identify as kinky, and I would educate them in our ways, but in a very gentle way. And then at the weekend, when I was at a kink event, I would just go full on observational comedy. This is what we like. And it's 2 very different kind of laughs, but often with the same punchlines. It's just, for one people, you're taking them into a world, and other people, this is their world. So it's observational. So I think with the kink comedy life coaching, it'll be the same kind of Monday to Friday. I do one, Saturday, Sunday, I do the other. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a real silver lining. I think the ability to adapt and evolve during this period is something that everyone should be trying to take out in the long run anyway. I know, well, I'd never heard of Zoom 5 or 6 weeks ago, and my life exists nearly purely on Zoom at the moment. So I'm really glad that has taken off.
And if all that fails, I'll be a full-time bee gardener.
Full-time bee. If you're apiculture and you know it, clap your hands. Is that something
with
about
press up?
Yeah. Yes, with a press up. Always with a press up. As we approach the end of this podcast, are there any little nuggets of wisdom for people who are feeling a little bit lost in this period that you'd like to share with us?
Well, my favourite quote is from Kermode and Mayo, who do the film podcast on a Friday afternoon on 5 Live, and they say, it'll all be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
I like that. I know what I've taken home from chatting to you is it's the little victories, which really count. So setting yourself small goals and achieving them. Also, live up to the clothes you're wearing.
Oh, yes, we should all be doing that, definitely.
If we go that, and whether you're only wearing clothes on your top half for Zoom conferences, live up to them. Be the clothes that you wear.
Or no clothes if you're doing an upside down handstand.
Yes, yes. So live up to the clothes you're not wearing.
Yeah.
Also applies. So where can people find you online?
I have two websites. So my comedy website is johnpendal.com and the leather website is leatherlondonguide.com. But if you're at all unsure, just put my full name into Google and they will pop up because nobody else has my name.
John, it has been an absolute delight speaking to you. I've had a lot of fun. My face hurts from smiling / giggling like a little nervous.
Yeah, it's nice to see you with clothes on.
Yeah. And oh dear, making me blush. I'm a 36-year-old man, and I'm blushing at the moment. It has been a real pleasure. I'm glad you're doing well, and keep up the kink coaching and the life coaching. And I look forward to seeing you in person whenever this whole
one day. I'll give you a big hug.
Take care, John, and I will catch you soon.
This is a lockdown booty call.